Overcooooming, PMO. Episode 2, Strategies. Part 1, Erecting Barriers. Before we can begin the work of overcooming PMO in earnest, we must first erect some barriers between ourselves and that which will assail our efforts at rectifying the problem. These barriers prevent the access of the avenues which we stumble down back to the smog of smut. As most of the smog is transmitted via cell phone and laptop internet connection, and as it is unlikely that we will find many who are unable and willing to disconnect themselves and their devices from the internet, we must erect a barrier between our use of the devices and their access to the providers of smut. In a better timeline, we would simply call our internet service providers and request that they block all websites providing such materials from sending the filth to our terminals, and they would do so. Alas, I doubt that is likely to be a viable option for many. If that doesn't work out, we can take steps on our end to block our access to it by blocking it at our access points, usually an internet router. There are many tutorials online already that walk you through how this is done, as it is not the same for every make and model of router, so you will need to educate yourself about your router and its abilities. Some are not compatible with this method and make it difficult, if not impossible, to alter directly which websites you can access. For an in-depth how-to, I would advise you to watch Tech Lockdown's videos on the subject. It is a comprehensive how-to guide that will walk you through the steps to block all the tech avenues to the smog. Part 2, Cleaning Up. Now that you have blocked the access points of the smog, you can begin to clean up the residue that is left over from the years of being immersed in it. Step 1. Begin fasting, eating 1 meal a day, modest in size and flavor. Nothing too sweet or too savory. And here are some suggestions. Eggs, potatoes, cashews, almonds, pecans, cabbage, broccoli, kale, fish, chicken, turkey. Step 2. Drink only distilled water, or if not available, purified water. Do not drink water from the tap unless you are purifying it yourself, or it is coming from a pure source, very unlikely in most cases. Check your water source and ensure that it is pure. If possible, purchase or build a water distiller. It is crucial that you drink pure water during this period, and distilled water will help in the detoxification process. Step 3. Exercise. The ideal exercise routine should be tailored to your individual circumstances and body type. To help get over the hurdle that is the ideal, we will try to provide you with a rough starting map or a body type chart and some starting points from which you can begin tailoring your routine around. Body types. Endos. Think E. Honda, Blanca, Zangief, and Mike Hager from Street Fighter. I'm going to use Street Fighter characters for these analogies. Soft and round body types. They gain muscle and fat very easily. They're generally short and stocky builds. They have a rounder physique, find it hard to lose fat, they have a slow metabolism, and their muscles are not generally well defined. Ectos. Think Vega, Dalsim, Remy, Yang Yun, and Guy. Small, delicate frames and bone structures. Classic hard gainers. They have flat chests in general, small shoulders, generally thin with lean muscle mass. They find it hard to gain weight, and they have a very fast metabolism. And Mesos. Think Ryu, Kin, Guile, Fei Long, Charlie, Bison, Sagat, and Cody. Athletic. Generally hard-bodied, well-defined muscles, rectangular-shaped bodies. Strong, and they find it easy to gain muscle, and they also gain fat more easily than ectomorphs. You may find that you are more of one and less of another, or a hybrid of sorts. After you've unlocked your body type, you can construct your routine. What works for a meso may not work for an ecto, but you may have mesomorphic tendencies or traits that can affect the decisions on what routine is best for you. For instance, there are endomorphic body types that have mesomorphic tendencies in muscle definition, especially with the use of enhancements. But that's a subject for another day. Take care to discover to the best of your ability what your body type is. After you've established your body type and a proper routine, implementing and remaining consistent with it is where the actual work resides. It is both the easiest and the hardest part of the objective. Easy because the thinking part is largely handled by the routine. Difficult because consistency is a habit that, if not developed early in life, finds itself fighting through an ocean of competing habits for space in one's mind. Delaying developing this habit is very foolish, however, and there is no better time to begin honing your consistency than the present. I will endeavor here to equip you with some of the tools I have found useful in helping me remain consistent, having not had the trait developed in me as a young man myself. Daily task sheets. I found a template of a 24-hour day broken up into half-hour increments and printed out 7 pages. I logged everything I did from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep. I kept it in a plastic clipboard and tracked my activities for a week. At the end of the week, I recapped and learned a tremendous amount about myself and how I used time. I set timers on my phone for when I would wake and when I would eat lunch and when I would sleep, but also at midday and noon, and then again at twilight, which is usually between 6 and 7 here, or whenever it is that the sun begins to set at your region. These were not timers to remind me of any particular task, however. They were mainly timers to remind me of the present time of day, to keep my mind at all times present, or as near to all time as I could muster. These timers eventually became internal. This would assist me in my own time and motion studies as to how long it took me to do various things, from prepping my food to washing myself, and most keenly, what I spent the majority of my time on. I used the daily task sheet after that for about half a year on and off. Habit tracker apps can also be helpful here, and there are tons of these available now. Experiment and find which one works for you if they do. Visible reminders. Whiteboards are universally utilized to relay temporary messages across office spaces and workspaces around the world. It is and has continued to be one of the best tools I have for keeping my eye space and thus mind space filled with reminders of my objectives. It's akin to covering your workspace in advertisements to remind you what it is you are working on, or where it is you are wanting to go, or simply reminders of what you have accomplished already. Failing that, mounting paper to the wall that has your goals, objectives, motivations, and encouragement is acceptable and should be done just the same. Stacking habits. Undoubtedly, we have all developed a ton of habits, some good, some bad, most in between. But this entire process is largely done unconsciously, unless you are mentored or raised in such a way, that is, consciously trying to shape your habits towards a desired end. Think boarding schools, military academies, or religious schooling. For the vast majority of people, however, this process is largely done unconsciously through osmosis. This can be harnessed to delete habits and adopt habits once you take conscious control over the process. An example often used is to stack your new habit on an already well-established habit you have, like, for instance, brushing your teeth. So, when most civilized people wake up, the first thing they do is to wash their face and brush their teeth, or rinse their mouth. This is a well-established habit, at least in the West, and adding a new habit to it is easy because it's already become second nature. So you wake up, brush your teeth, and wash your face, but now you also stretch for 5 minutes afterwards every time you brush your teeth and wash your face, or maybe do push-ups, or sit-ups, or pull-ups, what have you. You may even do light stretches while you're brushing. But the point remains, that stacking habits upon well-formed habits works in helping you remain consistent. Accountability buddies. These are friends you can choose to help hold you accountable for remaining consistent, and it can and should go both ways in the ideal situation. In such a situation, you would have two friends checking in with each other on a weekly or daily basis, sharing words of encouragement and detailing any struggles or successes they are experiencing. They can be close friends, a parent, a spouse or girlfriend, or a teacher or coach. Even your children can hold you accountable. If you do not have a potential candidate for your accountability buddy, do not let that stop you. The ultimate goal is to become accountable to yourself, and that in turn will build your self-respect. Cultivating your mindspace. Mindspace, a mnemonic for the 9 effects on human behavior used to explain and intervene in a variety of subject areas: messenger, incentives, norms, defaults, salience, priming, effect, commitments, and ego. Now, here I'm going to go off script, and I'm going to read to you a little bit of information that I found while doing research on this work. This comes from an NGO, and you can check their website out. It's called thedecisionlab.com, and they seem to offer guidance and policy framing for government policymakers. And they've come up with this mnemonic, mindspace. And I'm going to go through that here because there's information in this I think we can use. They've done a good bit of legwork here, and I'm going to take from this framework here and restructure it. But I'm going to read it here first for you, and then this will be the end of this video for strategies, at least right now. It's just, I want to give you a little bit of an insight into how I'm building this information up. So let's do this. So mindspace, it's a mnemonic again, and it starts with M, and M stands for messenger. And they put, we are heavily influenced by who is communicating information. Okay, so that means you are heavily being influenced by me, communicating this information to you. And you need to be aware of that, and you should be aware of it. If you are aware of it, you will begin to cultivate your mind space, right? This is now you becoming aware. First step is recognizing the messenger. The second one is incentives. And then they say, our responses to incentives are shaped by predictable mental shortcuts, such as the strong desire to avoid losses. Incentivization is attaching a reward to a given behavior or threatening a penalty for failing to do that behavior. In some cases, incentives are powerful tools to motivate people to take a certain action. Other times, however, incentives can backfire and might decrease motivation instead of increasing it. And the way they word this is rather, it can apply to a lot of things, right? It's true. What they've said here is true. It's just a matter of fact. People respond to incentives. But if you go onto their website and you dig deeper into what they're doing with it is, and it'll become more apparent as we go down the list. They're obviously, again, with the incentives, penalties, right? Threatening penalties. They're talking about taxes here. They can give tax benefits and then tax you and put a tax on certain things to stop you from doing it. If you go to their website, that's some of the ideas they put forth. But again, we're going to deconstruct this stuff and use it. I think it's just a good intellectual exercise for us to walk through here. Because again, these people are part of the problem. The people that made this mnemonic, the people that are educating our government policy makers, that are trying to make us into a Mandarin society where we are all one part of a collective. They're the ones writing this kind of stuff up, and we'll go through it. We'll just go through it. I'm going to stop blabbering here. We'll read it. Norms is the next one. So mindspace, again, mnemonic. M, messenger. I, incentives. N, norms. Norms. We are heavily influenced by what others do. Social norms are collectively held beliefs about what kind of behavior is appropriate in a given situation, They range from specific customs, for example, the Western custom of shaking hands with somebody when you meet them for the first time, to more general rules that govern behavior and influence our understanding of other people. Norms. What would our norms be, right? They tell us that it's normal to masturbate, right? That's a norm in our it's been twisted now. It didn't start off as a norm. It's now a norm to masturbate in society. And it wasn't. They flipped it. And, right, they did it by changing your mind space. So, norms. Defaults. Defaults. We go with the flow of preset options. Simply put, a default is the outcome a decision maker gets under the status quo. It is the preset option that is made available when we do nothing and requires no effort on our part. For example, when you subscribe to Netflix, your subscription automatically renews at the end of the monthly cycle, unless you choose to cancel it. Automatic renewals are a common example of defaults, and they're cleverly based on the well-researched principle that human beings are naturally predisposed to inertia, aka the status quo bias. And then they link to a document that will explain more about the status quo bias, which you should probably look into and not fall prey to defaults, right? In a video game, do you ever run with default settings, right? Do you ever choose the default character, my guy, when you play a video game? Does anyone ever choose default? I mean, sometimes, right? Sometimes, just to get a taste of the game, I guess, maybe. To see the basics. Some people that are like pro gamers, right? They try everybody, but most people customize, right? No one goes default. So don't be default. Don't go with the flow. That's the point. Salience for S. Our attention is drawn to novel things that seem relevant to us. The salience bias describes our tendency to focus on items or information that are more noteworthy while ignoring those that do not grab our attention. So, salience, again, this is how pornography works, right? On the novelty. Right? This is how you get drawn down the pit, is the stench, it changes every time, and it's rapid stench change, right? The smog is constantly changing. The images, the illusions are swirling. It's an endless pit of novel shit, and it gets sicker the deeper you go. So remain salient, right? And don't give your attention to things that are just novel, right? I mean, it's good to be awestruck by the new and to recognize novelty when you find it, but also be aware that there is an inborn tendency in us as creatures to be attracted to the novel. And they did this experiment with birds as well. They would take eggs, fake eggs, brightly colored eggs, and the birds would abandon their own eggs to sit on the more colorful egg. That's something I've heard in respect to this novelty seeking that all animals tend to show. P. Priming. Our actions are often influenced by subconscious cues. Priming, or the priming effect, occurs when an individual's exposure to a certain stimulus influences his or her response to a subsequent stimulus without any awareness of the connection. These stimuli are often related to words or images that people see during their day-to-day lives. And this one is important because if you've been in this space, right, this mind space of trying to overcome pornography addiction, priming is one of the main things that gets people back into the trap, is cues, and they are everywhere. From YouTube, like, it's insane. Like if you log out of your YouTube account, your Google account, and you just browse YouTube as like a ghost, right? Which is difficult because you have to wipe your cookie. You have to do a lot of shit to trick Google because they know so much about you and your IP and all that. So it's very difficult to hide from them who you are. And so even when you do all of that, they still kind of feed you shit that they know you're gonna like. But even then, their goal is to titillate you. So, like for me, I've done a lot of work in controlling the algorithm on Google by literally just saying do not recommend to almost, I spent a whole day just reloading the page and continually clicking do not recommend, I filled their library of do not recommends for channels on mine. So now I literally only get things that are close to or made by the people that I'm subscribed to or nearby, and then the occasional mainstream media news shit that another channel they create that I have to add to the list that comes up, like Lex Friedman. Like they keep trying. I've blocked his channel like 1,000 times, and they keep somehow, hey, you need to watch this. You need to watch this guy. You need to watch this guy, and I don't want to watch that guy. So priming is important, right? Be aware of that. You have to erect those barriers, and then also just be aware of it, so that when you see a nice ass or a nice pair of tits or a beautiful face or whatever it is that gets you off, right? Or that is your cue. Recognize your cues, and then be aware of it, right? So that when it happens and you start to feel the effects of priming, you don't fall into that trap, okay? The stimulus. You have to be aware of the stimulus. A lot of this stuff falls away once you just become aware of how it works. But for some, it's because they're playing on the inborn tendencies in us. I don't like to say the animal, because we are not animal. And I do not like to compare us to animals, even though we behave in a lot of ways like animals when we are unaware of our humanity. And so we can be utilized like animals. But the moment you become aware of your humanity, and you take hold of it, and you begin to block the attacks that try to lure you back into that primal state by priming you, until you become aware of that, it's difficult to navigate the seas. It seems very, you can fall into these traps. But again, presence of mind and awareness and cultivating your mind space is key. And I'm going all through these because I'm going to redo them for our purposes. Okay, but you need to be aware that this information was thought up by a think tank, and they are using it to make policy, and they are using it to shape your lives. Okay, and there's a reason why it's free. So continuing. Effect for A. Our actions are powerfully shaped by our actions are powerfully shaped by our emotional associations. So affect, not effect, but affect. So our actions can be powerfully shaped by our emotional associations, and this is key. You are emotionally attached to pornography in a way that you are not consciously aware of right now. And that emotional attachment is usually in the form of fear of rejection, or in some guys' cases, fear of underperformance. And in many guys' cases, it's simply it's a hatred of women in a way, a subconscious hatred of women, because pornography is essentially the can't even get the words out, objectification of the female body. It is, and there is no porn in which good things happen to the women involved. I'll put it that way. I'm getting off topic here. It's just important to remember the affects. Okay, so your emotional associations powerfully shape your actions. And if you're emotionally wrecked, that is, you're an emotional wrecked, your actions are going to be wrecked. Okay, and that's where they want to keep you. So we're not going to be emotional wrecks, right? We're going to become aware of our emotional states and start repairing them. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I left some parts out here. The affect heuristic describes how we often rely on our emotions rather than concrete information when making decisions. This allows us to reach a conclusion quickly and easily, but can also distort our thinking and lead us to make suboptimal choices. This is exactly why they use fear as their number one motivator for you, to keep you in fear, because you make poor decisions when you're scared or angry or horny. You know, the only time you make good decisions is when you're at peace. Some might say when you're happy, but that's not true either. A lot of people have made shitty decisions when they're happy, like say when they're on a winning streak at the casino and they're super happy and they think that they're going to continue winning and they keep betting and the house laughs in their face. The house is like, yeah, be happy, because we're going to gobble all that misery up here in a few minutes. But anyways, moving on from effect, we're going to commitments C. Commitments. We seek to be consistent with our public promises and to reciprocate action. So this is basically when you make a commitment, at least an open commitment or promise, a public promise or commitment to someone or someone that you care about usually, or someone that you at least respect and their opinion matters to you, you feel driven more to actually follow through, because you don't want to let them down, and you don't want to look like the guy who let them down. And you don't want to be known as the person who breaks promises. Some people in our society have become habitual liars due to the cultural sink. However, it is important to remember that commitments are a key to remaining consistent. And even they acknowledge this. This is why they like to get commitments from you, written in paper, so that they can legally hold you to them. But moving on to the final letter, E. Ego. We act in ways that make us feel better about ourselves. And here, I like that they finished it with this, because this is something that many people will tell you have to, especially in the psychedelic community, you have to kill, right? Your ego must die. You must kill your ego. Ego death. Take enough mushrooms and it will happen, whether you like it or not. Problem is that if you don't routinely stay on top of that, your ego comes back. I know firsthand. But I don't think that I agree anymore with the idea that one can kill the ego. I think it is something that should, as we are doing with the rest of this, it should be understood and controlled, and you should use it to make you better. And it shouldn't just make you feel better about yourself, it should make you better, okay, every day. Your ego should be your improver. So do the actions that make you feel good. And what really makes you feel good in this world, right, as a person? Some of you will probably say that masturbating makes me feel good. And I know there are very many people that believe that, but there are many, I've spoken to them, they're like, no, it's not a problem to me. I'm not addicted to porn. I masturbate maybe once or twice a week and I'm fine. I feel, it makes me feel better. It relieves stress. If I didn't do it, I would be horny all the time. And we will go over in depth how the psychological programming and damage is done by continually denying the fact that the act that you are doing is damaging to both the body, physical, and the mind, and the spirit, all three. And your ego plays a big role in shielding you from that. Because again, as they state here clearly, we act in ways that make us feel better about ourselves. And so your ego is telling you right now that masturbation feels good and is good. And you also have a ocean of other things telling you this, like the medical industry and the media and videos and video games and just everything, it's everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, all of the social media. So you're up against a lot, but fret not, for we are in this together. I am with you all the way. Well, at least as far as you'll go with me. And from there, you will handle this on your own. I will try my best to offer the tools that I have used to overcome this. And hopefully you will understand that every path that each one of us walks is our own, and that looking at how someone else is progressing along their path and judging your path towards theirs is not probably the best thing that you should do, because you can't walk their path and they're not walking your path. And though they might look like they're ahead of you in this respect, you may be ahead of them in other respects. The journey is multi-layered, multi-tiered, and don't get caught up in setbacks. I'm going to end this video here because I've already rambled long enough, and I hope this has been of some help. There will be more coming. Stay tuned and think about this. Rewatch the video, go through these techniques, start implementing those that you can, and if you have any ideas to add, leave them in the comments. I read almost all my comments eventually when YouTube decides to pass them on to me, but I do read all of them. I don't have very many. I don't have very many of you guys leaving comments. So those of you that do, I appreciate them, and I read them, and I will eventually, get around to leaving at least a heart. I don't respond to every one of them because most of them are like thank yous. So, but I will at least give them a heart when I see them, so you'll know that I did see it. But if you have any advice or any ideas to add to this that you've come across, any tools that you've developed in overcoming this, add them. Share these. We are building here a library, and we are building here the tools. Okay, this is all cutting edge stuff. All right. Till next time, thanks for having a look and a listen.